Give a big hand for Dennis Wood.
Welcome to Cooking with Fathead. Tonight, we will be dressing the table for dinner. The first thing about dressing the table is to keep everything nice and neat and orderly. Everything in its place, total control. First, the placemats. These were my grandmother's favorite placemats. She cried when she gave me these placemats. Keep everything separate from everything else. Otherwise, it might all be one thing and we couldn't deal with it. Then we put out our nice crystal. And while we were dressing the table, I'll tell you a little story about a little girl, 11 years old, lost out in the New Mexico night. This was my grandmother's favorite mitten china. She cried when she gave me this china. She was wandering beside a highway, one of those old two-lane blacktop highways with the bar ditches full of Johnson grass waving under the moonlight on either side. And we put the napkins next to each plate, everything nice and neat and orderly, everything separate, because we can't put things together because they'll just be too hard to deal with. We have to have control. You understand, Elvis? What do you think, Elvis? He never thinks anything. He never thinks about it. It's above his pay grade. This is my grandmother's favorite silverware. She bitched me out when she gave me this silverware. She said, "Fathead, you better take care of this now." So the little girl was wandering beside the highway. It was 2:30 in the morning, 5 miles from the nearest town, 1 mile from our old barracks where we lived on an abandoned World War II air base. And some kind people stopped and they picked her up. They looked at her and she looked like she was out of control. But they did figure out that she lived about a mile from there and they took her to our house. And you want to provide your guests with some form of entertainment. At least some little game or something that they can play to have fun with. And Mama said, "Fathead, you have an extra large brain cavity. You understand her. You go get her and put her in the car. She needs to go to El Paso for another treatment." The Fathead went to get her, and she ran around behind the washing machine and she cried, "No, Fathead, no, 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 Fathead, no, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing." Anyway, Fathead knew what he was doing. He put her in the car and they took her to El Paso and they put wires on her head. Like Fathead's science teacher put wires on a frog's leg and made her twitch like a frog's leg. Gave her electroshock, drug therapy, because you gotta get control. They stuffed pills down her throat. And then they sent her back home in the car. Then she knew who she was, but she was somebody else. She was the Queen of England, and it just wasn't that much that we could do for her. But we tried, and then the paramedics came to our door and they said, "She's got to go to the hospital." We said no. They pushed her way in, they hauled her out of the house and threw her in the ambulance and took her off to Hobbs, New Mexico, where Dr. Maddox filled her full of pills. Lots and lots of pills. Because you got to get control, total control, like I was saying. He stuffed her full of pills. You look like you could use some of these, Elvis. You look like you're out of control to me. His real name is God. but he thinks he's Elvis Presley, so I just call him Elvis for short, for his short temper, because he's got an anger problem. No regrets about anything. No problems whatsoever. Fathead's okay with everything, Elvis. Is that right, Elvis? Don't have an anger problem. Oh, shit. Now Fathead got to go put his head back together. While I put my head back together, I'll tell you another little story about the time when Grandma and Grandpa Fathead went to a special, very expensive party given by her boss, famous lawyer, who was giving it for his partner, another famous millionaire lawyer. Fathead's thinking, boy, I'm really looking forward to this. Getting all dressed up and going to this fabulous party. And there they all were in this very fancy, dancy occasion. And his wife's boss grabbed her at the welcome line and bent her over and kissed her on the lips. Then he turned to Fathead and he said, "Are you jealous, Fathead?" "Like I double fucking dare you. It's your wife's career, you know." And Fathead said, well, he was gonna say, "Why don't you go fuck yourself?" But he said, "Sure, I'm human." And then the boss said, "You're a very smart fella." And he took him into his den. He showed him his collection of ivory elephants. People give me elephants, you see, because I like them. They know I like them. And then he said, "You better get a better car." That I thought, "You got a good car. It's a classic. All right, we'll get a better image car. No problem." And then he said, "Mozart, artists in general, are just assholes. Now, I like these paintings because my aunt gave them to me. I like these paintings because my uncle gave them to me. But Mozart was an asshole. Mozart was an asshole. Yeah, that's right. Go see Amadeus and you'll see why I said Mozart was an asshole." And Fathead went to see Amadeus. And he saw a man clowning around in the face of death, in the shadow of his father, and he said, "Hey, wait a minute. Now Fathead understands the importance of being an asshole, being a clown." And Fathead ate some shit. But it was good shit. Some of the best. Superior shit, made by superior people. Just like Frank Lloyd Wright explained to the reporters who were inquiring about his affairs, said, "You know, the superior man makes his own rules, and his rules are superior to the rules of the inferior man because he's superior." Do you follow me? I forgot to give his wife a kiss. I forgot to blow your wife a kiss and say, "Here, honey, put that where you want to." Injustice in life generally is not that difficult as long as you're winning. But when you're losing, it's crap. It's shit. You got to eat it. We were all sitting there, and Fathead was seated beside beautiful, buxom, blonde Dawn Yvonne, the executive secretary, not the least bit self-conscious about anything. The Reverend came in. Tall, bear-shaped man with a huge suit, like a tent that floated over all of us, guided by an entourage of invisible tugboats as he went past the tables, sat down, ate steak and potatoes. Then he started talking to us, and he said, Now Mike here has done some really nice work on the doors, and Jerry has just done an amazing job on some of the grounds. And Jack, I just can't say enough about Jack and the way he's fixed up the roof. And you guys have all been wonderful. And Fathead here, well, the owners say he's worth its weight in gold. So I'm sure glad that he's the skinniest one here. So, and all of a sudden, the Reverend starts talking about how he started working when he was 15 and he hasn't stopped since. He's talking about how all his employees work hard for him and they give him respect. They call him Reverend, they call him brother, and he treats them right. If they show him how he can make more money, he'll give them more money. He says, this here is my daughter, Elizabeth. She takes care of all my businesses. You see, I didn't have a son. At that moment, Fathead, feeling kind of sick to his stomach, bit into a tomato a little too hard and squirted seeds and jism all over beautiful buxom blonde Donnie Vaughn's bare shoulder. And Fathead said, sorry. She said, that's okay. Okay, dinner's over. The Reverend got up to leave, approached beautiful buxom blonde Donnie Vaughn, and he said, I just want to know one thing, young lady. Who's your boyfriend? And she said, Johnson. And he said, what church do you go to? And she said, First Methodist. And he said, well, you're always welcome at our little temple. And from the back of the room, Elizabeth piped up, I love you, Daddy. And he said, oh, that's nice to hear now and then. And she said, yeah, like I don't say it every day. And he said, he just left. And then there was all this money mismanagement and all this stuff going on behind our backs. Selling Ponzi loan schemes, selling ozone machines. The bird was burning. And it was beautiful the way it burned. And finally came down to rest on the earth. And it burned and burned. And Fathead pissed on the ashes at high noon and died in a hail of emptiness. So, could we just have a moment of silence for all the unknown unknowns in our life? What do you think, Elvis? Think we ought to go on down that long road, sit with old friends who don't have to be told too much that it's all bullshit under old trees? What do you think, Elvis? I know it's above your pay grade, but you got to start thinking sometime. Really, Elvis. I mean, it's time you got rhythm, man. What should we do, Elvis? Go on down that long road until we find the distance that can make us whole? Or should we just keep on thinking? What do you think, Elvis? 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 Not talking, Elvis. What happened? What do you think we ought to do now, Elvis? And the last guy out of the room. Please turn out the candle in the chicken.